My name is Gregory Reed. I am a photographer, an editorial photographer, and I work in the Miami area, but I travel around the country as well. And what I love to do is capture images that tell stories about life and what's going on in our lives. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's fun. Well, most of the time I try to make it fun, but that's what I do for a living. So both of my parents, as you probably have already heard, are musicians. And I grew up in Miami Gardens, or what used to be called Carroll City, Florida, which is not that far away from here. And my parents were relentless in their desire for us to be exposed to the arts. They were just horrendous. If I wanted to play football in the middle of the street, which is what I really wanted to do, they would stop us and they would pile us in the car and we would go to concerts, or we would go to plays, or to my horror, we would go to the ballet, or we would go to an opera. But that was consistent and that was always happening. And what it did was it taught me that there were other forms of entertainment and other things that we could do to have fun.
So when you're talking, I know it's a natural tendency to address everybody like
Right.
you're doing, but address the camera. Because
okay.
You're going to have, it's going to be coming out of a computer.
Right.
Where did you go to school, and what did you learn that still informs you today and helped you with your career?
So I went to for high school, I was at Hialeah Miami Lakes Senior High School. I played football there, ran track, but I started out at Howard University in the business school. And ultimately, I went to film school, starting out at Howard University. And my goal was to learn how to write scripts, to become a producer and become a film editor. And I started in that process of taking those courses and working my way through that. And those processes taught me that storytelling is, number one, a process that has a start, a middle, and a finish, that there is no substitute for that. You've got to actually investigate the story, work your way through the story, and ultimately look at what are those elements that you're trying to get across to folks. I met him last year in Miami. He was here for an event, and I actually took photos of that event. And I was a behind-the-scenes photographer for that event. What he has done is taken a product that no one thought would be the product to ever survive and made it his own. And he's been able to spin off different products that really make a difference. He's entertaining lots of people with his products. Anything that's presidential, forget it. There's a press corps that always travels with the president, and that there are press people that get invited to come in to work with the president's team. So the presidential process is that they approve you for your credentials, and then once you've been approved for credentials, you now are assigned to work within a specific space. So there are people that are working behind you. So if this is the president, there are people that are working on the stage or the platform that's somewhere in the room, and then there are people that are assigned to work in the buffer zone, so to speak. And the people working in the buffer zone, they're the ones that once you have your clearance, your security clearance, they're now going to allow you to take those photos and work within that space. And that space, you're sharing it with maybe 25 or 30, maybe up to 50 photographers, and working through that. Now, the natural tendency is to fight. The minute the president comes out, the natural tendency is to fight for space to take that photo. Well, after that initial fight, everybody kind of calms down and you kind of assume a space that you want to work within. And once you have that space that you're working within, now you kind of become polite. And you kind of get out of the way, and then you move to another space, and then you move to another space. So your goal is to get the photos that tell the story that you're trying to tell about the subject that's in front of you. And once you have that, now you kind of get out of the way and start to round out the amount of the number of images and the content that you have that will further enhance your story. So I don't know if you've ever watched the news, and during that broadcast, and they're talking about whoever it is, they'll give you slow photographs coming in and coming out of that particular subject. Well, that just means that they picked photos that try to illustrate the story that they're talking about. So that means that those photos have been taken in such a way that they get close-ups, they get medium shots, they get wide shots, but they're always trying to make sure that they tell the story of the space that the president was in, as well as the facial expressions that the president was giving off. Now, I'll always say that not only do you get those photos, but you turn around and you get the photos of the crowd that are looking at him. Yes, so what they'll do is they'll give you a space from left to right, forward and back that you can move around in. And there are some photographers that are actually submitting they're doing their submissions from that space. So they'll sit down with a laptop and they may have another person working with them where they're taking those shots and they're working right there, and they probably won't give up that space. But you're trying to get within that confined area as many shots as you possibly can. You'll hear me rattle off 1,000 shots in that one space, knowing that some are going to be out of focus, some are going to be very sharp, some are wide, some have got people walking in and out of the frame that you're in. So you've got to get enough shots to work with. Number one, the editor is looking for something that they can use for the story that they're trying to tell. My first event was a wedding, a house wedding, and I was scared. You know, I was really frightened because I really just absolutely had no idea what I was doing. I know what I wanted to do, but when we got to the house was dark. It was like we were at a nightclub and they had only lit candles, and it's like the worst kind of scenario. And you don't want to trip and fall, and you don't want to do anything stupid. But I started with that, and from there, while I was in grad school, I went to the Miami International University of Art and Design downtown. And I knew that I needed to work, and I needed to get my skills, but I didn't want to do it by myself. So I went and I volunteered at the Art Center. At that time, I was a really big guy. I was 360 pounds, really big. But in spite of that, when I went to the Art Center, what they said was, well, would you like to be an usher? I said, no, I don't want to be a big fat black guy usher. I want to be a big black fat guy photographer until I could do something different. So what I did was they allowed me to start shooting kiddie shows. So they would allow me to come in, and if there was a petting zoo or if there was a family show where it wasn't really a high impact, they would allow me to shoot those shows. And gradually what I did was I started to build up that clientele. So once I started working for the Arts, then another location opened up in Broward, the Miramar Cultural Center, and I started asking them. But all of those places, they really just wanted somebody that already had experience. But I'm not the kind of guy that you can look at and say, well, no. You can't tell me no because I'm going to knock on your door again. So I would knock on Monday, and then I would knock on Tuesday, and then I would knock on Wednesday. By Friday, they were so tired of seeing me that they said, please come in and stop calling us. So I started doing shows there, and that's when I was able to start to show that I did have a gift, and what I called it the gift of sight.